With us now, Congressman, 7th District, Republican, Dave Brat. Congressman, good to have you, man.
Hey, John. Thanks, B. Thanks. Great to be on, as always.
Now, let's get to leadership. I'm going to skip the Democratic debate because I just want to get into the meat. If we have time at the end, I can get your thoughts on that. But I want to go to the leadership. You know, a lot of people, Congressman, looked at your victory over Eric Cantor last June, and I was, of course, one of the people that predicted that could happen. And they looked at the young guns, and the young guns were Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy, and Paul Ryan. You were able to defeat one of them, Eric, about 15 months ago. Now you look at Kevin McCarthy, he's out. Paul Ryan, the last man standing. He's kind of the reluctant warrior to lead the House. How do you see this thing playing out now? Yeah,
well, there's kind of a false narrative up on D.C., that the House is in chaos and all this kind of thing. And, it's just overblown when the establishment doesn't get the exact person they want, but then they send the mainstream media into these narratives that there's a crisis. But in no other election is that the case, right? When the Democrats have an election, it's 5 or 6 people running for a slot. It's not a crisis. In any other congressional election, it's called the democratic process. And so people just got to be mindful of that. So, there's probably 10 people in play, and our Freedom Caucus just wants assurances that the next speaker isn't, heavy-handed and that they will fight on behalf of the American people. I came in, you remember, last year with the unconstitutional amnesty. We pledged we're going to get rid of Obamacare. We made pledges on overreach on EPA and Dodd-Frank we're going to clean up. The Iran war was actually should have been a treaty, and we didn't push back properly on that one. And so the American people just want us to step up and make the case and to ensure that leadership will make that case for us, because the American people have been invested, spending their time and energy. And then we in the Freedom Caucus just want assurances that our own leadership will let us vote our conscience on the floor of the House and allow us to bring bills into play, and that will follow the committee process. Right now, this year, we have not done that. The budget process fell apart, and so at the end of the year, there's a handful of people in a back room somewhere deciding what's going to happen with the U.S. budget. I'm on the budget committee, and I'm not in that room. And we're going to end up with probably a terrible outcome. We're blowing the budget caps, increase the debt ceiling, and all this kind of thing because we didn't go through regular order. We should have been done 4 months ago. And so for all those reasons, we just want to interview, and every other group should interview all the candidates and just have an election. And it should be that straightforward.
Now, right now, Congressman Paul Ryan has not committed to regular order. He hasn't even committed that he was going to run for speaker, but he's certainly not committed to regular order, which is one of the biggest issues of the Freedom Caucus, so everybody understands what that means. That means if somebody has a bill or has an idea and they can get it through committee, it can go someplace instead of 5 people squashing it, which has been what's been happening. So if Ryan hasn't committed for regular order, how would he be viable based on everything that your Freedom Conference has said?
Yeah, well, and I don't want to prejudge any candidate. He hasn't stepped up one way or the other yet. We don't even know if he's running, and so I don't want to make any announcements premature. We're backing Dan Webster because he has ensured that he will run a fair process. He did that in Florida as Speaker of the House in Florida and got their approval rating as a body from 10% up to 60%. That's an amazing achievement, and you'll never hear that out of the mainstream media. Also, Dan doesn't have the highest conservative score. He's more closer with Kevin McCarthy and some of those guys. And he's not in our Freedom Caucus. So our group, contrary to public opinion, is not testing ideological purity. Mm-hmm. We're going with a person who is got good integrity, he's trustworthy, and he's made the commitment to running a fair process. And that's the main thing we're looking for.
So we just had on your colleague from the 2nd District, Republican Scott Ridgell, who said that, Congressman, that the Freedom Caucus, we got 50 members. He said they have a disproportionate influence over the conference as a whole. Like there's only 50 people in it. So he said you guys have a disproportionate influence. How do you respond to that?
I don't think that's accurate. I've been on all the shows saying the opposite, and the press, of course, wants to usually set up more liberal outcomes. So we're not the liberal outcome. We believe in balancing the budget and that kind of thing. And so if you look truly at the numbers, it's not just 50. Last week we had a vote on the CR, the continuing resolution. That's leadership's budget that they're putting forward. And 150 Republicans voted no on that. So that's not 50. That's 150 Republicans. The majority of the Republican conference voted against leadership's own budget. So there's the true number. And then going forward, the speaker knew that he would have to have a large number of Democrat votes, maybe to sustain his leadership on the floor if it came to a vote. And so, you know, some guys can say you got a disproportionate influence. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that are with us that just don't want to come out in public because they're scared of retribution.
Right.
They're scared of losing their committees. They're scared of losing their PAC money. If you speak up in any way, shape, or form against leadership, there's punishment to be meted out. And you can just go look at the money each of us gets from the various D.C. interest groups and see that in 5 seconds. And so some people are scared to speak up, and I get it, but the country's at stake. We got $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities, $19 trillion in debt, and if we don't turn that around soon, the kids are going to be in a terrible spot coming up for the next generation.
So, Congressman, let's stay on leadership for a second, and then I want to move to the budget issue. So right now, of the available candidates, of the candidates that said, I'm going to run for speaker, it sounds like what you're saying is, as of today, you would still be in favor of Daniel Webster, right?
Yeah, and I don't mean by that I'm in favor of him over and above the other 10. We haven't spoken to the other 10 yet. So as of now, he's the only one that has stepped up to ensure all those fair process pieces we want to see in place.
Now, what you just mentioned about the reaction of leadership when somebody speaks up against them and they dry the PAC money up. I mean, this is a big deal, Congressman. This is one of the reasons that many conservatives and many people like yourself are upset, because they feel the process is financially rigged. I mean, I've heard several times that the quote-unquote establishment, whoever that is, I don't even know what that means anymore, in your district, is searching for a candidate to primary you, and they're going to spend $1 million. Where they would get that $1 million, I have no idea, but that's what I'm being told over and over. Now, you're trying to do the right thing. How do people reconcile this? They're trying to do the right thing. They're going to get a primary challenge. They can't raise the money because they've been cut off because they speak up against leadership. How do you reconcile your way through that, Congressman?
Yeah, well, thank goodness. I mean, the one thing I got that I don't think they have is the people on my side. And the numbers bear that out. I was on Meet the Press this week. You know, go out to my Facebook and people can watch that full interview. I started off with the economic numbers. But the important thing is that show started off, even they said 72% of Republicans are not happy with Republican leadership for precisely the reasons we're talking about here, this heavy-handedness. The American people like fairness, and they want a fair debate. 60% of the Republicans feel betrayed by the Republican Party. Jim Jordan's been spreading that word. That's a big deal. And then the press will do everything they can to run over us. But I have my criteria for our selection. Now, the press says they can't find it. Right? It's fascinating to me. I have 5 out on my Facebook and websites. I got 5 process and 5 policy criterion that we want to see in play for the next speaker. And Newt Gingrich vetted those. He said they're very good on the air several times. And I think he was on the Hannity show in particular pointing that out. But he's told other friends that my criteria are very good. And so you got a former speaker, the head of the Contract for America, that was very successful. They implemented that, balanced the budget back with Clinton in play, reduced welfare, made some great reforms there, and the American people on our side. So, this establishment kind of thing can look for someone to primary and et cetera. But that's precisely what is driving the anger of the American people when they hear that kind of thing going on. And so now the new thing is that the American people are checking in on this, right? They're finding out, who are these people that are doing this?
Right.
Who are these, what corporate shills or whatever, what are the crony attachments? Is it Export-Import Bank? What kind of crony aspect is attached to these people? Because they're not doing it for the best interest of the country. They're doing it because they have some special favors, most likely up in D.C.
Absolutely. It's the usual gang of suspects, the National Chamber of Commerce searching the globe for these trade deals and amnesty for slave labor, the TARPist. I mean, the whole bit, it never ends. That's where the money is coming out of. You mentioned the Export-Import Bank. I want to get into that. Average layman on the street looks at this and says, why on earth do we have to set aside taxpayer dollars in this Export-Import Bank for General Electric and other huge companies that make billions of dollars, some of them parked overseas or hundreds of millions anyway? Why is the taxpayer even involved in this?
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, and the logic couldn't be better. You wanted to tie in the Democrat debate. Well, just listen to Bernie Sanders, right? He wants to give everything to everybody for free, just like every king and every monarch through economic history. Right here, I'm for the people. We're going to do central planning. I'm going to give you free stuff. And every single one of those regimes failed, and they never produced any economic growth. So the ultimate irony now is you got the business class going in on crony capitalism and gifts, right, coming from the king to them. And they say, this is good for business. We got to have this lower interest rate that the export-import gives us. It's good for business. They don't get that you're killing the golden goose, right? The idea that you're killing capitalism in the process never dawns on them.
Right.
So, and that's what's wrong with the country right now. Everyone is in short term for themselves right now, some of these big corporate interests. The business guys, the saying used to be, as General Motors goes, so goes the nation. That's the way it should be. The old corporate guys used to look out for the bottom line for their firm and look out for the best interest of the United States. That's not happening these days in some cases, and that is a scary idea. And so the idea that the average person that's scraping by should be the backstop for low interest rates to big firms who are making billions of dollars in profits is too much to bear. And we debated this on Meet the Press. Some of the establishment side are putting up a discharge petition this week to do an end run around the whole committee structure of Congress. That's what we're talking about, right? Get the fair order, regular order. They're going to do an end run around the entire committee process to get the Export-Import Bank passed for the cronies. So there's no better example of what's going wrong up there.
Sure. And that is the money that is funding these people to stay in power. That's where the Iron Triangle comes in, right?
Yep.
Because then the big companies, they take those tax incentives from the Export-Import Bank or whatever they're getting them, and they funnel money back door through the lobbyists that then funnel money into the candidates and the PACs that are going to keep them in power, so we continue to have the Export-Import Bank. So for the average middle-class guy in the street like, me and many of our listeners on this radio network, I mean, Congressman, it's very frustrating because you just feel like you don't have a say in what's going on in your own country. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and the big firms can afford some of this regulation, right? And they know. I mean, I've heard, I don't want to really get in, I've heard some big financial players even say it's a good thing. A bunch of these small banks are going out of business, and they're happy about that. The small bank in many rural communities is the backbone of their community, right? They pay for the softball team. Yep. They know the person. They make a loan based on trust and a handshake alone. This is the backbone of America. And right now, business creation, right, the net new jobs being created is less than the small businesses that are going out of business. So there's more small businesses closing shop than starting right now. And that's not the American deal, and that's largely taking place because of this move toward the idea that you got to be connected to D.C. and the power brokers if you want to stay in business and avoid all these regulatory traps.
Absolutely. I mean, that is, I think when you cited the number of Republicans that feel betrayed by leadership or their party, this is one of the things that ties into it. And that's why, that's why you've got a populist movement right now. Donald Trump and Ben Carson combined in almost every poll over 50%. This is almost an unheard of time we're in. I've only got about 3 minutes. I want to get to the budget battle coming up. Look, Congressman, nobody wants a government shutdown, but we know at the end of the day there's going to be a debt ceiling increase. There's going to be continuing resolution. There's going to be omnibus. It always happens. What kind of change can we see in this process?
Well, right. So, I mean, that's why we're really digging in here, is because the same thing happens every single year. Right. And we should have finished the budget process 4 months ago, handed our budget off to and the appropriations bills over to the Senate. And then if the Senate can't vote on anything, which that appears to be the case, they refuse to vote on anything, then we say, look, we did our job. You put us in office. We did our job. We kept the faith. If the Senate somehow gets their act together, and we should put pressure on them to do that, then it goes to the president's desk, and then that's where you negotiate and compromise, right?
Right.
We got the two bodies, and so we can get that right. But now we've created a crisis at the end of the year, and we're going to have a debt ceiling increase debate. So we ought to absolutely put in writing our pledge to the American people as to how we're going to get the budget process right next year, by following regular order before we sign up to do that debt ceiling increase. Without that, it's just pure cynicism. And last year I said I would not vote for a debt ceiling increase, right? Just some clean increase, because some of us got to start putting our names down on paper ahead of time so leadership can do the whip top vote and say, hey, we got a problem here. Mm-hmm. You know, we got 100 guys who are not going to vote for this nonsense every year of busting the budget caps. And all of this is in light of, right, we know we're going to bust the budget caps as well. So more than a $450 billion deficit this year, $500 billion deficits in the past, $1 trillion in the past, and going up to $1 trillion deficits by 2025, as the CBO says. And so if we don't get this straight, this is the major deal, that we got to get this budget cleaned up and a good orderly process. And it is tied with the leadership question of whether they're committed to a fair, regular order process that gets things straight.
All right, that is going to be the final word. We want to thank Congressman Dave Brat for being with us, Republican 7th District. Dave, I got just one final yes or no answer. I keep getting asked by people over and over. I just want you to put this to bed so we can move on. People keep asking me, is Dave Brat going to run for governor in 2017 in Virginia? I don't know how this rumor got out, but can you put that to bed for us one way or the other?
No. I love my job. I studied economics for 20 years. I love applying the policy up in D.C. If they write me out of my district, then maybe I got to run. Right? If they do some crazy plan and I get written out of my own district by redistricting or something, you never know. But I love being in Congress. It's a dream job working on behalf of the American people in the 7th District, and I couldn't be happier to do it.
Okay, Congressman, we're out of time. I want to thank Congressman Dr. Dave Brat for being with us, brat.house.gov.